Tensura, The Abyss Demon by Wahab. Chapter 91. The world had lost all its color. No sound, no movement, nothing but an endless void of gray. Time itself had ceased to flow. The very concept of motion had been stripped away, leaving behind a hollow, frozen existence. Everything stood still, the air lay stagnant, and even the fundamental forces of reality had been suspended. Yet, within this deathly silence, one thing defied the stillness. Guy's sword. Like a crimson streak cutting through a frozen canvas, his blade surged forward, unstoppable, inevitable, toward Rimuru's unmoving form. A grin crept onto Guy's face as his victory solidified. Every detail of his strategy had fallen perfectly into place. The battle had been intense, a relentless exchange of blows meant to pull Rimuru's focus entirely on him. Then, at the precise moment of final engagement, Guy had activated Time Stop, ensuring he was close enough, fast enough, and precise enough to end it before Rimuru could adapt. Within frozen time, all things ceased, including matter and energy. Things such as nuclear forces do not exist, annulling physical durability. Thus even the strongest of beings lost their physical durability. If his sword struck true, Rimuru would be gravely injured, perhaps even erased. But that was only if he were struck. Clang! A crystalline, ringing sound shattered the absolute silence of the world. Guy's eyes widened in shock. His blade stopped, caught by another. What he feared had happened. Rimuru had moved within frozen time. Guy couldn't help but curse at his own naivety. Truly fighting Rimuru and attempting to come out victorious was close to, if not utterly, impossible. Still holding his sword firm against Guy's, Rimuru chuckled. The amusement in his voice was unmistakable. "I knew you were up to something," he said, his golden eyes scanning the gray, unmoving world around him. "So this is Time Stop. Interesting. I've never seen the world like this before." Then, with an almost lazy smile, he returned his gaze to Guy. "It was a clever idea," Rimuru praised. "Luring me into close combat, then activating Time Stop at the last possible second so I wouldn't have time to defend. Brilliant." He tightened his grip on his weapon, his aura untouched by the laws of frozen time. "Unfortunately for you, the moment I awakened, Time Stop ceased to be a weakness of mine." It was as he said. During his evolution into a true demon lord, Rimuru's insatiable desire for greater strength had driven him to eliminate any remaining weaknesses. Time Stop had been the only thing beyond his adaptation, until now. Fortunately, with Raphael's guidance, he recalled the sensation of his entire existence evolving into a digital life form the first time he encountered Time Stop. That experience had granted him insight, and with his unique skill, Transcendent One, evolving into Transcendent King, replicating the process became effortless. Now, Rimuru was no longer bound by the limitations of conventional reality. He had become a digital life form, capable of perceiving and manipulating information particles at will. Though this transformation was new, his understanding of it was rapidly evolving. A sudden, booming laugh echoed through the frozen world, drawing Rimuru's attention. Guy was ecstatic. His crimson eyes burned with exhilaration, his battle-hardened grin widening. For as long as he could remember, there had been only two beings he had never been able to confidently claim victory over, Veldanava and Rimuru. And yet, that was what made fighting them so satisfying. Each battle forced him to grow, to push past his limits. And this was what he craved. Then, Rimuru's gaze flickered to something else. A second blade. The other sword Guy had materialized mid-battle. World, huh? One of the 8 Genesis-class weapons forged by Veldanava himself. Even within this frozen world, its overwhelming presence was undeniable. A blade that seemed to hum with incredible power, its iridescent sheen shifting between shades of deep blue, vibrant purple, and soft pink, as if mirroring the ever-changing nature of existence itself. Its form was sleek and elegant, refined to the very limits of perfection. The pressure it radiated was immense, worthy of its classification. The pulsating magic sword fit perfectly in Guy's hand as if it were an extension of his body, even though it had been a long time since he last wielded it. The battle was far from over. And the thrill of it had only just begun. "If we're resorting to that," Rimuru said with a smirk, "let me invite my friend over." He stretched his hand into the empty space beside him. The very fabric of reality rippled in response, a dark portal blooming into existence. A gateway leading into the endless abyss of Rimuru's stomach. From its depths, something stirred. A moment later, Rimuru's fingers wrapped around the hilt of a weapon. And as he pulled it free, the world itself seemed to shudder. The very instant the blade fully materialized, an overwhelming pressure crashed down upon the frozen world, eclipsing even the might of world. A silent proclamation of dominance. The source of this immeasurable presence. Exodus. A jet-black sword, its sleek, razor-edged blade exuding an aura of boundless destruction. Near the hilt, a glowing purple core pulsed, radiating a power both ancient and unfathomable. The mere existence of the blade seemed to distort the world around it, as if reality itself strained under its presence. Guy's eyes gleamed with intrigue as he felt the crushing weight of Exodus power. This sword was a Genesis class above Genesis class. Exodus. Its erratic glow pulsed with excitement, as if rejoicing in the hands of its one true master. Power surged seamlessly through Rimuru, resonating with his very being. Guy clicked his tongue. Tisk. We now know who Veldanava's favorite primordial is, he muttered, his tone laced with irritation. Rimuru chuckled at the remark, but his mind was elsewhere. He was still adjusting, familiarizing himself with this suspended world and the laws that governed it. The nature of speech itself was different here. Talking in suspended world wasn't a matter of sound, it was a matter of intent. They weren't exchanging words in the traditional sense. Instead, they were imbuing their will into the information particles, flinging them at one another in bursts of pure thought. Everything about time stop was a game-ending ability in most battles. Those who couldn't move in frozen time were completely helpless against those who could. And against those who could activate it at will. It was even worse. Even movement within this frozen world was unlike anything Rimuru had ever experienced. There was no speed here. Speed itself was meaningless. Movement wasn't about acceleration or velocity, it was simply instantaneous. Information particles transcended space and time. Those who could manipulate them weren't just fast, they were beyond the very concept of speed itself. Rimuru willed the information particles that now made up his digital existence and launched himself forward. His blade aimed straight for Guy. But Guy moved with him, manipulating infins of his own. Clang. World met Exodus. Steel screeched against steel, neither blade yielding. Guy swung his second sword, aiming for a lethal counterattack. But Rimuru, his proficiency with information manipulation skyrocketing with Raphael's guidance, effortlessly evaded. He leaned back, smoothly sidestepping the attack with ease. And then, their battle truly began. A flurry of sword strikes erupted between them. Each attack was precise, each movement calculated, each clash of blades filled with enough force to shatter entire worlds. Neither held back. This was a battle between beings who transcended time itself. As the battle progressed, Rimuru slowly realized a fundamental truth about fighting within this suspended world. Victory wasn't about speed, power, or technique, none of those concepts mattered here. Battles in frozen time were determined by who could manipulate information particles better and who could impose their will upon them more effectively. And in this regard, the gap between Guy and Rimuru was narrowing at a terrifying rate. Guy had always been a master of combat, but even he understood the implications of what was happening. The advantage he had counted on, his overwhelming edge and time stop, was slipping away. He could feel it. Each clash, each strike, each exchange of intent tipped the scales ever so slightly in Rimuru's favor. If this continued, the battle would become unwinnable. And so, Guy refused to give Rimuru even a moment to breathe. I just need one opening. One mistake. One miscalculation. If Rimuru slipped up even once, Guy would seize victory in an instant. But Rimuru was proving exactly why he was an anomaly. For an incalculable amount of time, their wills clashed in the stillness of eternity. In this frozen world, offense and defense were one and the same. Neither of them simply swung their swords, they imposed their will upon the information particles that made up this reality. They weren't just attacking each other. They were rewriting each other's very existence. And the battlefield suffered for it. Entire hills and mountains crumbled from the aftershocks of their fight. The earth itself shattered beneath them. It wasn't because of their strength alone. It was because in this frozen world, even the molecules that held matter together had stopped moving. Because of this, anything that is given the slightest touch instantly collapses. The laws of physics had no meaning here. This was not a world meant for conventional life. The barrier between digital lifeforms and everything else was not one that could be easily crossed. Digital lifeforms might as well be considered transcendent gods to those who could not move in the suspended world. The battle continued for what felt like forever until things began to change. The stalemate was over. Guy had noticed it subtly at first, mere flickers of change in their exchanges. But then, it became undeniable. Rimuru's manipulation of information particles had reached a level where he could now interfere with Guy's control. That was it. It was official. Guy had no way of ever defeating Rimuru. His greatest trump card, Time Stop, the most reliable way to inflict significant damage, was now completely useless. With a sharp breath, Guy switched tactics. He deactivated Time Stop. And the world resumed. Color returned. The once muted world roared back to life, the howling of the snowstorm filling the air once more. Everything had gone back to normal. Diablo and Misery, who had been unable to perceive the frozen battle, immediately sensed the shift. They had missed everything: the summoning of Genesis-class weapons, the clash between digital gods, and the monumental struggle of wills. But they could see its aftermath. They saw it in the collapsed mountains, destroyed Earth. It was even a stroke of luck that the barrier covering the entire battlefield remained intact. But what caught everyone's attention the most was Guy's expression. For the first time, Guy Crimson looked frustrated. He pointed his sword at Rimuru, his crimson eyes sharp and resolute. "From this point on, I will not be holding back." His voice carried a weight it hadn't before. "I expect you to do the same." Rimuru's smile deepened. He, you noticed." Of course, Guy had. From the very start, Rimuru had been holding back. The fact that he had utilized only one of his ultimate skills was a clear giveaway. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't disrespect. It was calculation. Rimuru had used this battle to fully understand his power. While Raphael had already provided an estimate of his strength, knowing one's power, getting used to it and wielding it efficiently in battle were two entirely different things. Now, he had fully comprehended his true might. "All right, Guy." As a show of respect, Rimuru's eyes shone with power. "I will not hold back any longer." A voice echoed in his mind. "Understood." Shifting into full power battle mode. All restrictions were lifted, and in that instant the world trembled. A wave of power erupted from Rimuru, a presence so overwhelming it seemed to suffocate existence itself. It was dominion. It was Haki. A force so ungodly that the very space within the barrier distorted under its weight. Misery and Velzard stood awestruck, unable to fathom the sheer scale of Rimuru's true power. And Diablo was delighted. His golden eyes gleamed with unrestrained admiration. "Kufufufu, how magnificent," he mused, hands clasped together in excitement. "Rimuru-sama is truly one of a kind. I can't wait to witness the expressions of the girls as I boast about being the only one to witness Rimuru-sama's full power firsthand." A low chuckle escaped his lips. Meanwhile, Rimuru's body radiated an intense, shimmering glow, as he unleashed the full might of the body gifted to him by Veldanava. At the start of the battle, his physical form had performed on the same level as mythical-grade weapons. But now, it had reached the absolute peak of Genesis class. In Rimuru's grip, Exodus shone brighter than ever, bathed in the overwhelming power of the silver primordial. The other sword, the one he had forged mid-battle with material creation, began to crack, unable to handle the immense energy surging through him. Without hesitation, Rimuru dismissed it, converting it back into pure energy and absorbing it into himself. Guy's grip on world tightened. His frustration was gone, replaced by pure exhilaration. Finally, a battle that would push him beyond his limits. He met Rimuru's glowing gaze, his lips curling into a feral grin. "Hey, how fun." The air itself vibrated under the sheer pressure radiating from Rimuru. All restrictions were gone, all shackles removed. His true might unbound, unrestricted, and absolute had finally been unleashed. Guy felt it immediately. He would have to utilize everything in his arsenal to match Rimuru. A thought suddenly crossed his mind. Has Veldanava's seal been removed? Focus. A voice rang out from behind him. It was Rimuru. Rimuru had moved first. Faster than anyone could react, he vanished. Guy barely had time to react. A devastating blow to his side sent him hurtling through the air, smashing through several layers of frozen terrain. But Rimuru was already there, waiting in his path. Before Guy could even correct his stance, Rimuru caught him mid-flight and drove a knee into his gut. Guh! The force ruptured space itself, a shockwave tearing apart the landscape around them. Even with his unparalleled endurance and resistance, Guy was taking massive damage and couldn't suppress the pain he was feeling at the moment. He's gotten faster. From the start Guy had remained alert, but he couldn't keep up with Rimuru's speed. With a sharp gaze, Rimuru suddenly manifested behind Guy, his sword, Exodus, poised to strike Guy. Guy's instinct screamed at him. In an impressive display of battle instincts, Guy reacted, blocking Rimuru's attack with his sword whirled. The collision between the swords generated an immense force that blew away the raging snow. Guy, who had defended with all his might, was sent skidding across the ground from the sheer force from Rimuru's strike. He finally realized just how outmatched he was. The only way to bridge this gap in strength was through the growing power of the ultimate skill, Wrathful King Satanel. Guy turned his attention to Rimuru only to realize that he was gone. Right here, Guy heard from behind him once again. Out of instinct, Guy swung whirled, attempting to regain control of the fight either by blocking the incoming strike as best he could or striking Rimuru first. But his sword cut through nothing but the air. Rimuru was gone. Before he could react, a leg slammed into him with tremendous power. Guy was sent flying once again. Realizing his precarious situation, Guy immediately got a grip on himself, twisting his body mid-air as he stood up straight, ready. Rimuru walked through the snowstorm casually as he maintained his grip on Exodus. His hair billowing in the wind. His gaze was calm and calculated as he strode towards Guy. Guy, understanding the shift in dynamics, amped up the power of Satanel to a level he could still maintain. His Magicule's levels exploded as his body underwent a reformation to handle the surge of power. With World in Guy's hand, Exodus in Rimuru's. The next stage of the battle intensified. Rimuru's eyes glowed bright golden and Guy's crimson red as they both unleashed their ultimate abilities. The frozen continent trembled. The very air crackled with the sheer intensity of their power. Rimuru's golden eyes gleamed with overwhelming confidence. His aura burned like a sun against the endless snow, warping the air with its sheer pressure. Across from him, Guy Crimson stood tall, his own presence flaring like a crimson inferno. The ground beneath them cracked, unable to withstand the weight of their clashing energies. Guy's fingers tightened around World. He could feel Wrathful King Satanel surging through him, amplifying his already monstrous strength. The only way to keep up with Rimuru now was to push his power to its absolute limit. If you think about it, it all makes sense. Rimuru, ever since he acquired the unique skill Transcendent One, has always been fighting opponents several magnitudes stronger than himself. As such, Rimuru's power has grown to match and slightly surpass those superior opponents as best as the power of the unique skill could allow. Now that Rimuru has evolved into a Devil Lord, that power which was a match for beings on the level of the true dragons experienced an astronomical boost, to the extent that the difference in strength between those beings now and the current Rimuru is so vast that it can't be quantified. It would take a significant amount of time for Guy's strength via Satanel to match Rimuru's. And Rimuru, being as knowledgeable and experienced as he is, knows how to use that overwhelming strength against beings like Guy. Without hesitation, Guy moved. The frozen landscape shattered beneath his feet as he shot forward, World cutting through the air with enough force to distort space itself. Rimuru met the attack head-on, Exodus gleaming with divine radiance. The moment their swords met, reality itself screamed. The impact of their clash sent shockwaves rippling through the continent, flattening mountains and splitting glaciers apart. The sheer force dispersed the raging snowstorm, leaving only a wasteland of ice and destruction in their wake. Guy pushed forward, his strikes becoming faster and heavier as Satanel continuously amplified his power. Each swing carried the power to destroy a planet, each clash of their swords unleashing devastation upon the world. But Rimuru was faster, sharper, stronger. With every exchange, he adapted, countering Guy's attacks with effortless precision. His movements were fluid, almost like water, unreadable yet nigh impossible to evade. Every step he took forced Guy to react, every strike of Exodus sent the primordial skidding backward. Even with Wrathful King Satanel bolstering his strength, even with his instincts honed to the absolute peak, he couldn't land a single decisive blow. Rimuru wasn't holding back at all. Path to victory. This allows the user to make perfect and calculated moves, as well as predict the future of any battle. The moves or decisions carried out is most likely to attain victory. Its effects are stronger if the opponent is stronger than the user. Battle instinct. The user possesses an innate aptitude for fighting in any combat, being able to create and adapt techniques or methods to ensure victory. The user is able to automatically identify the best personal course of action during any fight without consciously thinking out a plan. It also allows the user to perceive danger and slight changes in an environment, especially in a battlefield. Absolute potential. User has absolute and unlimited potential, capacity for growth and learning, allowing the user to learn and master absolutely anything they want with great efficiency, regardless of their skills, personality, species, etc. Optimal efficiency. The user automatically utilize anything to their highest potential in the most effective manner possible. This effectively lowers any chance of failing to complete a set task or risks that may result in an undesirable outcome. The user of this ability has complete and utter control over their skills and instinctively knows which of their abilities will best suit any situation. From the moment he faced Guy, Path to Victory had already laid out the steps necessary to triumph. Every movement, every clash of swords, and every potential counter had already been calculated down to the finest detail. As Guy came at him, world-cleaving through the frozen air with terrifying force, Rimuru moved in perfect synchrony with the attack. Guy was an unparalleled swordsman, but Rimuru was something far beyond. With absolute potential, Rimuru had long since transcended the traditional concept of sword mastery. Every technique Guy attempted, feints, deceptive strikes, and unpredictable patterns, was instantly dissected and either countered or improved upon. With optimal efficiency, it was easy to replicate Guy's sword skills and utilize it to its utmost. When Guy aimed a high-speed thrust at Rimuru's chest, Rimuru tilted his blade at the perfect angle, parrying with minimal effort and using the momentum to counterattack. When Guy unleashed a flurry of rapid slashes, Rimuru read the attack pattern, disappeared from view, and reappeared at an angle Guy hadn't accounted for, delivering a punishing riposte. His strikes were minimal yet devastating. Every swing of Exodus was optimized for efficiency and lethality. Unlike Guy, whose blows carried raw force, Rimuru's were precise, exploiting microscopic weaknesses in Guy's form and stance. Within seconds, Guy found himself completely overwhelmed. No matter how much he tried to adjust, Rimuru had already accounted for it. Rimuru's combat prowess kept evolving right before Guy's eyes. Even with Guy's growing strength, Rimuru still managed to have the upper hand. Guy, ever the warrior, did something unexpected. A feint? No, a deliberate mistake. It was an opening so blatant, so obviously a trap, that any conventional fighter would hesitate. But Rimuru was no ordinary combatant. The moment the mistake presented itself, battle instinct activated. Instead of overthinking it, Rimuru acted purely on the ultimate subconscious level. His body moved before his mind could even register the decision. Instead of taking the bait, Rimuru twisted midair, Exodus rotating in his grip at an unnatural angle, transforming a near-lethal counterattack from Guy into an opportunity for himself. Slash! A deep cut appeared on Guy's arm before he even realized what had happened. The trap had backfired. Now forced on the defensive, Guy's reaction time was pushed beyond its limits as Rimuru's attacks became even sharper, faster, and incomprehensibly efficient. Every movement, every strike, every block, flawless. In a moment of defiance, Guy summoned the power of Satanel into world, and swung with all his mighty. A cataclysmic force erupted from his sword. The world turned red, the sky splitting apart as pure destruction flooded outward. And yet, Rimuru was unfazed. He simply raised his hand. A wave of absolute darkness spread outward. Then, as if erasing Guy's attack from existence, the destructive force simply vanished. The true might of the ultimate skill, gluttonous King Beelzebub, bared its fang as it devoured the attack and the space in which it traveled effortlessly. Rimuru's voice was calm. Thanks for the meal. In the blink of an eye, he appeared before Guy, his golden gaze piercing straight through him. Before Guy could react, a single slash, so fast it almost reached light speed. An overwhelming pain spread through Guy's entire body as Exodus cut cleanly through his defenses, sending him crashing into the distant icebergs. A massive explosion followed, engulfing the battlefield in a blinding flash of golden and crimson light. It was the same type of attack Guy had used earlier, powered by Satanel. Lying in the ruins of ice and snow, Guy forced himself to his feet. Despite the pain, despite the looming loss, a slow grin formed on his lips. Rimuru, still standing tall, simply smiled. He knew Guy wouldn't give up. Guy right now was biding time for his power to grow to Rimuru's level. Even Rimuru understood this. He, at this point, was giving Guy a fighting chance. Ever since the battle started, Guy hadn't been able to reach Rimuru's level of strength. It meant that Rimuru's strength was so far above Guy's that Transcendent King didn't see it fit to adapt and transcend. But Guy Crimson was not one to accept defeat so easily. Even after being completely outmaneuvered, his mind remained razor sharp, constantly analyzing and searching for ways to achieve victory. His swordsmanship had failed him, but that only meant it was time to shift his approach. Activating his last trump card, the ultimate skill, Patience Lord Gabriel, one of the Angelic series ultimate skill belonging to Velzard. He timed it perfectly, fixation, locking Rimuru's body in temporal stasis. Guy had long since analyzed and copied the skill. Although he couldn't use the full might of the ability, it could give him the edge he needed to overturn this disadvantageous situation. Rimuru's golden eyes widened slightly as he realized that his body was slowing down. Oh. Report. It's confirmed to be the effects of the ultimate skill, Patience Lord Gabriel. The ability, Fixation, allows the user to fix something into its current state, effectively locking it inside of temporal stasis. Raphael's analysis was as meticulous as always, but Rimuru remained unfazed. From his position, frozen in space, he watched as Guy vanished from view, his speed multiplying under the effects of Satinel. A crimson blur streaked across the battlefield, rapidly closing in. For a brief moment, Rimuru entertained the idea of breaking free with sheer willpower. He could. But why waste the opportunity to evolve further? He waited. And waited as he watched Guy close in. Just to hear the words he was hoping for. Notice. The phenomena has been adapted too. A smirk tugged at the corner of Rimuru's lips. Perfect. Vanishing from his position, Rimuru charged at Guy, a tremendous amount of energy emanating from Exodus. Guy, realizing that even fixation couldn't buy him time, switched to a defensive stance. He had lost sight of Rimuru once again. Shifting into a defensive stance, he activated his greatest shield, an imitation of Velzard's most powerful defensive technique, Snow Crystal. The air coalesced around Guy, locked in stasis with fixation, wrapping him in an indestructible shield that should have been impervious to any attack. It was a shield meant to be impenetrable. It offered the third greatest defense in the world, with very few if not none being able to bypass it. At least that was how it was meant to be. And then, it shattered. Before Guy's very eyes, his perfect defense collapsed, not from brute force, not from overwhelming power, but from something even more terrifying. A dark void swirled in space, a gravitational anomaly so absolute that even space itself was being devoured. Guy watched as his defense was sucked into nothingness. The battlefield turned silent, but Rimuru was nowhere to be found. Guy couldn't sense his presence anywhere. Then, without warning, a shift. Guy's instinct screamed at him. Danger. Overwhelming, absolute danger. Higher up in the sky, with his presence completely suppressed, Rimuru floated upside down, looking straight down at Guy. This battle is over. Then, Rimuru raised a single hand. A golden sphere of condensed, hyper-optimized holy energy formed in his palm. It was pure destruction, perfectly engineered to counter Guy's very existence. A culmination of Rimuru's skills, Transcendent King, Satinel, and Veldora, and holy magic, all refined into one attack. Guy's instinct screamed at him. His body moved before his mind could process, but it was already too late. With a flick of his wrist, the battlefield vanished. The frozen continent trembled. A blinding explosion of divine radiance erupted across the frozen continent, erasing the land for hundreds of miles. The very fabric of reality trembled. Dot, 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 dot. And when the light faded, a good portion of the northern continent had been thoroughly eviscerated, with the remaining land mass threatening to sink into the ocean. Guy lay on the ground, half of his body was gone while the remaining portion had visible wounds that bled. His sword, world, was cracked. His entire being had been pushed past its limits. The huge gash by his side and the wounds released torrents of magicules as it refused to regenerate. The power behind Rimuru's attack was so powerful that had Guy not fully concentrated on defense in the last second, he would have been erased from the face of the earth. Rimuru floated down, as he stood above Guy looking surprised. "Whoa, you survived that. That's nuts," he said, scratching the back of his head. No one except Rimuru knew just how devastating the true might of that attack was. Satinel amplified the strength of the magic, Veldora imbued it with the ability to break down anything the attack came into contact with, and Transcendent King further amplified the power of the attack to surpass the strength of the target while bypassing all the target's resistances and defenses. It was a sure kill attack that no one in the world can survive. Rimuru actually had to limit the amount of holy power he poured into the attack lest he destroyed the frozen continent and erased all of its inhabitants. Even the barrier placed above the battlefield had shattered as a result of the force produced by the attack. What the hell was that? Guy asked, utterly perplexed. The power behind the attack was too absurd. It reminded Guy of Milam's Dragonova. How the hell do you defend against that? Were the thoughts of everyone who witnessed that power. One of my finisher moves. What do you think? Rimuru said, brushing off the fact that one of his finisher moves could casually obliterate a planet. One of your finisher moves. Now that's just bullshit. Guy cursed. If there were other finisher moves like that one then. Guy didn't even want to think about it. That was exhilarating. Not bad, Rimuru said. His golden gaze shone with undeniable supremacy. You put up a good fight, Guy. A pause. Then a small smirk formed on his lips. And with that, the battle ended. The bearer of the title of strongest primordial demon has been decided. Chapter 92. The battle between Guy and Rimuru could only be described in one word. Cataclysmic. The moment Rimuru and Guy got serious, the battlefield's danger level skyrocketed several notches. Misery and Diablo had long since lost track of the battle as they couldn't keep up with the absurd speed those two were moving at. Velzard on the other hand had to utilize her full strength to contain this battle. If she failed to do so, then the continent would sink and all its inhabitants would most likely be killed from the energy aftermath. No living being could hope to survive if they are even slightly grazed by the chaotic energy those two were releasing. Even the likes of true demon lords would be obliterated. As the fight progressed, it was easy to tell that Rimuru was superior. None of Guy's attacks had any effect on Rimuru, and Rimuru hadn't yet unleashed the killing blow. But that all changed within a fraction of a second. Velzard, Diablo and Misery felt it. But they were too late. A golden light shone bright, encapsulating the entire continent before a wave of indiscriminating violence exploded outwards with an ungodly degree of force. Velzard could tell that even she couldn't contain this much power. She did what she thought was best and flew away, out of the range of the attack. Diablo and Misery, quick to realize that things weren't looking good, followed suit. The next moment, an intense shockwave struck the protective barrier, but that was merely an aftershock, even so its power was immense. The impact shattered the barrier in an instant. It was an absolute, supreme strike that ate away at the continent. A terrifying wave of holy power spread across the entirety of the frozen continent, purifying all the ambient magicules. Lesser monsters were wiped out without being able to put up any resistance, and not even knowing what hit them. Higher-level monsters such as the demons that inhabit this wasteland barely survived. Regarding those who were closest to the battle, Velzard, Diablo and Misery. Their strength was severely depleted due to being bathed in such overwhelmingly potent holy power, but that was it. If they hadn't escaped in time and had been close enough to bear the full brunt of that power, Diablo and Misery would have been wiped out instantly while Velzard would have suffered severe injuries. Fortunately, there were no casualties. But the frozen continent is well on its way to being the frozen island. Dot, 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 dot. Snowstorms endlessly raged across the continent. From a distance, the frozen palace stood firm within the ice continent's white expanse. Yet upon closer inspection, it became obvious that the grandeur had suffered a recent blow. Several structures had collapsed, gaping holes marred the once pristine walls. It was the aftermath of Rimuru Tempest's final attack. The aura of devastation hadn't yet faded, and in its echo, demons of the red and green lineage scurried around, using magic to reconstruct the grand castle. Inside the deepest sanctum of the frozen palace, the atmosphere told a different story. On a high balcony that overlooked the horizon of the continent, a land of frost as far as the eye could see. Guy Crimson sat lazily with a wine glass in hand, legs crossed and his crimson hair blowing slightly in the freezing winds. Beside him sat Velzard. Behind them stood Misery, Guy's ever-loyal maid, her emerald hair a stark contrast to the icy background. She stood silent, statuesque. Opposite Guy and Velzard sat the one who had almost destroyed the entire continent, Rimuru Tempest. The atmosphere around pulsed with a sovereignty that demanded respect. Behind him stood Diablo, exuding a lethal grace befitting his rank as the pinnacle of demandom. At the center of the gathering sat a modest round table, though what was on it could feed an army. Dishes crafted by the best chefs in Tempest adorned the space. Guy clicked his tongue, setting his half-empty wine glass down with exaggerated irritation. Tisk. Using holy magic was foul, he muttered, rubbing his temple like he was still recovering from the memory. Rimuru, who was nibbling on a cream-filled donut, arched a brow and smirked. How is that foul? Using everything in your arsenal in a battle is a given. He leaned forward, setting his pastry down and lacing his fingers together as he locked eyes with the Red King. Not my fault you can't use holy magic. Not that it would have mattered anyway, Rimuru added, the last part slipping out in a cocky, whispered mumble. Kufufufufu, it seems you're having a hard time processing your loss, Guy. Diablo's voice echoed smoothly, laced with the kind of smugness that could only come from a flawlessly orchestrated jab. He stood straight as ever behind Rimuru, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Well, it's not like I didn't tell you. You just had to figure that out for yourself. The vein on Guy's temple twitched. Tick marks began to visibly form across his forehead like ominous warning signs on a volcano nearing eruption. His crimson eyes narrowed dangerously, but his composed posture remained untouched. If he reacted to Diablo's words, then he'd basically be falling for his taunts. He also didn't say anything as there was no way he would actually win a contest of words against Diablo. Say, Rimuru, Guy began, changing the topic with a shift in tone that suddenly carried a sharp weight. Have you noticed the disturbances in the Western nations lately? Rimuru, mid-bite into another donut, let out a soft hum. Gran Bel Rosso and Yuki Kagurazaka, he responded casually, not missing a beat as he savored the soft sweetness. Yuki's been less active, but still an eyesore. Gran Bel, though, has been actively making his move in the shadows. Plotting. Whatever he's planning, it's probably going to dump more work on my desk. Guy leaned forward, red eyes flaring slightly. So are you gonna deal with it? Or should I? If you ask me, I think the humans have gotten a little too bold lately. It's not all of them, Rimuru pointed out. Just the ones who think they can match wits with us. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha hey hey. The laughter of the two overlords reverberated across the room. Then Guy's amusement faded into a quiet exhale. On a serious note, it's quite annoying. Guy views humans as interesting creatures, but they were weak and stupid. Having to constantly deal with humans who think they are superior, and as such should rule the world becomes boring and pestilent. You do what you have to do, Rimuru said simply, casually tossing the final piece of his donut into his mouth. That simple sentence told Guy everything he needed to hear. Rimuru was nonchalant, too nonchalant. At this point, Rimuru is too invested in human society. If he is being so nonchalant knowing that there are fools out there trying to ruin the peace he's building, then it meant he had a plan. Guy relaxed back into his chair, trusting that if Rimuru wasn't acting yet, it was because he was waiting for the right moment to strike. Believing so, Guy just let things be. Like Rimuru said, he'll do what he has to do. The comfortable silence was suddenly broken by the two most powerful demon lords simultaneously reaching for the same object, the last donut. Their eyes met. Oi, this is mine. Guy snapped. Says who? Rimuru shot back. What began as a war of words rapidly devolved into a tug of war between two powerhouses over one pastry. Fingers gripped. Tension rose. Don't be stingy, Rimuru. You've got mountains of these back in your nation. Guy argued, trying to pry the donut from his rival's grasp. Actually, this was my last stash. Rimuru countered, digging in. Don't try to fool me. You have such capable subordinates who can make these for you. Now let go. Rimuru narrowed his eyes. Okay, how about this? I get this donut, and in exchange I'll send 5 boxes to you later. Oh, then you let me have this one, and send 10 boxes. Guy bargained, his smirk growing wide. What the hell? That makes no sense. Why are you so greedy? You're the one being greedy. Back and forth they went, two beings who could flatten countries bickered like children. Had anyone outside seen this, they'd swear it was a hallucination. Just as their squabble reached critical mass, a sudden chill swept across the balcony. A sharp, biting wind that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air. The donut in their hands abruptly froze solid, turning into a glittering ice sculpture of itself. Both demons immediately let go. Tink. The donut clinked against the plate like a chunk of glass. Thank you for the donut. Velzard's cool voice cut through the tension as she gracefully picked up the plate, turned, and walked away without a single glance back. Quote, dot quote. The stunned silence was beyond words. Two demon lords. Outplayed. In broad daylight. By the white ice dragon herself. Quote, dot. You said something about 5 boxes. Guy said after a pause, half as a joke, half as hope. Not happening. Tisk. 6 individuals sat, having a clandestine meeting, the topic of which the end result could bring nations to ruin. Aren't you overly cautious, Yuki-sama? Misha of Women, one of the 3 bosses of Cerberus, asked with a curious smirk, her voice laced with equal parts amusement and suspicion. You can say I'm overly cautious, Yuki replied, his tone sharp and devoid of humor, but I'd say I'm exercising the right amount of caution. His gaze hardened as he continued, with Rimuru's dominance over the council now solidified, you can bet he has eyes on every movement across the western nations, Lubelius included. Folding his arms, Yuki's voice dropped lower, colder. That's why I've avoided any overt actions. No schemes, nothing. But if things go the way I intend, I'll acquire the strongest pawn I could ask for. And if things don't turn out well? Asked Laplace, his usual playful grin ever present. Granbell and the entire Rosso family will take the fall for it. Even the 5 great elders will be weakened afterwards. Yuki said without a trace of remorse, his cold pragmatism sending a chill through the room. Indeed, the 5 great elders aren't really that impressive to be honest, except for those 2, Kaguli remarked. Kagali's offhand remark confused Ter again. 2. I thought that Mariabel had already been taken care of. Wouldn't that leave only Granbell? Looks like you guys didn't know. Within the Rosso family, there are 3 people that you cannot underestimate, Kaguli quickly corrected. Mariabel had died, leaving 2 remaining. They knew this from information gathered by Cerberus. Well, technically this last person isn't one of the 5 elders. The rumor is that the Count of the Cider Border has a subordinate, a real tough character, Yuki divulged, smiling wryly as he shared the information with his companions. The Count of the Cider Border was in charge of safeguarding the northern realm of the Kingdom of Ingratia. The land had been protected by a guardian for generations. This guardian wore a mask and armor that covered him from head to toe. No one knew about his true identity, and he was a mystery who answered directly to Granbell. Even though he was not one of the 5 great elders, anyone who knew about him wouldn't dare cross him. Yuki originally heard about this masked man from Damrata. Even Damrata said, though I haven't actually fought the guy, I'm not sure I would win. It's quite telling of his strength. After all, Damrata had only spoken highly of Hinata and no one else. To Yuki's knowledge, there were only 3 people within the western nations that Damrata was wary of, Hinata, Mariabel, and that man. From Damrata's viewpoint, compared to the head of the 5 elders, Granbell, that mysterious man was much more difficult to deal with. Damrata of Gold was one of the leaders of the secret organization Cerberus. Yuki trusted him as a good companion and leader, so if he said that the man was rather powerful, then they definitely couldn't ignore him. Laplace tried to make sense of everything. What's the deal with this guy then? I'm not sure. I've never met him. But apparently the North is peaceful all thanks to that man. According to Damrata, he had witnessed him fighting against the demons from the Northern Realm. Yuki's words shocked everyone. While Kaguli and Misha caught wind of this information beforehand, they still couldn't help but be shocked, nonetheless. It was absolutely mind-blowing. I heard that that man's name is Razul. Elder Granbell gave him this name personally. You mean Elder Granbell named him? Then could it be? Looks like Kaguli-sama did not know this either. Indeed, Damrata claims that Razul apparently is not human. Misha explained. Yuki added some more information. Yup, that's what Damrata told me. Apparently, his mask and armor aren't equipment, but his actual body. However, this meant nothing to Laplace and the other clowns. That really doesn't matter though. Just to clarify, when ya said demons from the Northern Realm, you aren't talking about that demon lord's lackeys, are ya? Right, if it's that demon lord, Lord of Darkness, the Western continent would be in ashes already. Laplace and Kaguli normally wouldn't look so panicked, but no one made fun of them. Neither did Yuki. Don't be so nervous. I guess you were really afraid of Demon Lord Guy Crimson. That aside, regarding your question, the demons from the Northern Realm are obviously Demon Lord Guy's men. It seems that Guy has permitted his subordinates to go off and invade human society for their own amusement. To demons, it's like a game, though the ones being attacked would hardly agree to that sentiment. However, Rizul made it so that they were blocked outside Ingratia's border. That man had managed to defeat armies of demons by himself and protected human society. Listening to just how powerful the man was, everyone fell silent and still except for Yuki. While I also found it rather unbelievable, I still think it's true. That being said, Demon Lord Guy never fights seriously, which is why the Western nations are at peace. Regardless, this Rizul does pose quite the threat. He seems pretty reckless. I'd never be able to do something like that, confessed Laplace. Everyone slowly started to recover from the onslaught of shocking information. So what's the plan now? Tyr asked. Hearing this, Yuki smiled happily. Well, about that, let's get back to where we left off. Just as I've said, the Rossos have always held on to their trump card, Rizul. Since they never knew when the demons would attack, they couldn't move their pawn away from the north because it was acting as a deterrent. That was the reason why Mariabelle didn't account Rizul in her plan. After all, he was a strategic piece who served Granbelle directly. He was not someone that even Mariabelle could order around. It wasn't like Yuki had only found out about that man recently. The reason why they didn't utilize this Rizul despite knowing his strength was because an opportunity never emerged. If they were to use him without carefully considering it first, then Guy's men could decimate the Western continent. Yuki wanted to avoid this possibility and therefore insisted on not doing anything about the Northern Realm. However, the situation had changed. Now let's get to the crux of the matter. I had a meeting with Granbelle and made a deal with the old man. I've informed you all of what we spoke about before. Yuki's smile disappeared after he finished talking. Everyone nodded, and Kaguli spoke in his place. The true identity of that god everyone worships in the Western Holy Church is just who we suspected. Furthermore, Granbelle was extremely saddened by the passing of Mariabelle. This is why he has decided to collaborate with Yuki-sama. What a foolish old man. Quiet now, Laplace. Yuki-sama was asked to do a job. We are preparing according to this plan. Yuki and Granbelle's secret meeting. Its content was: in the Grand Cathedral, a battle with the full force of the Rosso family would take place. This plan included the agents of the Foreign Intelligence Agency of Siltrasso and the surviving members of Blood Shadow. Among them were many other worlders summoned by the Rosso family. Moreover, Rizul would be recalled from the northern border as well. I am curious how strong they will be when all of the Rossos move out. Kaguli muttered to herself with an evil grin. Everyone present wondered the same thing. Then, Yuki-sama, do you know where this holy ark is hidden? Granbelle has already given me comprehensive information about it. But considering that he may be deceiving us, we have to be cautious. I'll take the honor. Although I ain't too sure about doing this one alone, can I bring Ter and Footman along? Asked Laplace. While I want to say yes, I have another job for Ter. All right, Footman alone should be enough, but what do y'all want to do with Ter? She has the most important job this time. By the way, avoid fighting as much as possible. Prioritize the goal of our visit, Yuki reminded everyone. Since there is the possibility that it's a trap, you must retreat immediately upon encountering danger. Kaguli added, like a concerned mother fussing over her children. We ain't kids, ya know. We got that covered already, Laplace replied, full of confidence. Footman silently nodded along, agreeing with Laplace. That's the spirit. Demon Lord Luminous is Demon Lord Valentine's master. Since Valentine's power could rival mine, Luminous' strength goes without saying. She's probably stronger than I was during my prime. Do you have a rough idea now, Laplace? Our primary goal isn't to steal the Holy Ark, but to gather as much information as possible with the least amount of risk. Don't ya worry. We don't owe that old man Granbell anything. He never hired the moderate Harlequin alliance either, so we'll just do our best within our abilities. You have a point, albeit your aid as well this time. After all, this Holy Ark is what Granbell considered the weapon for the final battle. After Kaguli shared her concerns, Laplace and Yuki quickly reassured her. Ya don't have faith in us. That hurts a bit. No, that's not what I mean. It's only natural for the place to be highly guarded and secured with traps. I'm only doing this to be certain. While Yuki had confidence in Laplace and the others, he had no idea what could happen this time. If he didn't strategize appropriately, the entire plan would fail. That he could not accept. I will secretly trail behind everyone. The operation shall commence at your own pace. I see, so we are supposed to stall the enemies. That's quite smart. Worst case scenario, you guys escape in the midst of chaos while I grab the objective. At that, Yuki cracked a smile. The plan was flawless. He had discussed it with Granbell several times and confirmed that Granbell was indeed serious. This was an opportunity of a lifetime, and they wouldn't get something like this again in the future. No matter the cost, we must get our hands on this Holy Ark. Yuki thought decisively. By the way, is this thing really that good? What even is this Holy Ark? Laplace questioned, somewhat dubious. Ah, I heard it contains the strongest hero, one said to have fought toe-to-toe with the storm dragon Veldora. She is under the control of Luminous, so I plan to analyze the spell on the Ark and make her my pawn. Huh. It can't be, is this real? What is this all about? He. Yuki's next comment stupefied his audience. This prize is immeasurably valuable. Now that we have settled on moving to the east, I shall figure out the secret to dominating the ultimate hero. Now understanding just how valuable the Holy Ark was, they were all excited. Misha received orders to prepare for their move to the eastern headquarters, yet even she was flustered at the news. This was to be expected. If they could control that hero, the individual strong enough to fight a true dragon, the strongest species in the world, Cerberus and Yuki's ambition, world domination, would no longer be a far-fetched fantasy. No wonder boss is still cautious, Laplace mumbled. Indeed, if that's the case, please allow me to join you in researching the matter. Haha, you are getting ahead of yourself, Kaguli. It's dangerous to believe everything Granbell says, even if I personally think it has decent enough credibility. Anyhow, failure is not tolerated. Kaguli was confident in herself. Yuki-sama can rest assured, don't you guys drag him down now. Gotcha. Just leave it to me. Laplace and Footman knew the full weight of their duty and became motivated. Seeing the two in this eager state, Yuki felt very satisfied. Before another word could be spoken, a strange, amused voice echoed through the chamber, immediately raising everyone's alert. This sounds like so much fun. Can I get in on it as well? A slender, unfamiliar hand materialized from behind Yuki, resting almost casually on his shoulder. In that instant, a wave of suffocating tension and raw, primal terror blanketed the room. Everyone's skin prickled as their instinct screamed at them, danger. This feeling was ever more prominent for Yuki as he felt something inexplicably precious being ripped from him. He leapt away from the hand instinctively, heart pounding as he whipped around, eyes wide. Kaguli, Laplace, Footman, Terre, and Misha moved in unison, surrounding the unknown entity with their senses heightened. This place, hidden and protected by powerful barriers, should have been impossible to infiltrate undetected. The very fact that someone not only entered but did so without triggering a single alarm was all they needed to know. This presence was beyond them. All eyes landed on a man, calm, composed, and undeniably powerful. His presence swallowed the room like a black hole, drawing their confidence into oblivion. Beside him stood a striking man in a pristine butler uniform, his composed demeanor hiding the palpable threat he radiated. No one moved. No one breathed. It felt like the air itself had turned to glass, fragile and deadly. Yuki's voice cracked as he finally recognized the intruder, his body trembling with uncharacteristic fear. Demon Lord Rimuru, he whispered, sweat dripping down his brow in rivers. Rimuru stood at the center of the storm he'd brought with him, golden eyes swirling with stars, arrogance etched into his every movement. Diablo stood silently by his side, a sinister smirk just barely tugging at the corners of his lips. Even as they stood before them, no one could feel their presence. They were simply there. And then Rimuru spoke, his voice calm but absolute. The day of reckoning has arrived, Yuki Kagarizaka. You have 1 minute to explain yourself before I kill you and everyone present.